Hello and welcome. I'm Eric Nentrup with the EdSafe Artificial Intelligence Alliance. A core piece of the ESAA's work centers around the SAFE Benchmarks framework. We use this framework as a means to engage various constituents across the education landscape to design an equitable outcome for all learners and improved working experiences for dedicated educators through innovative and emerging technology employing AI. Today, I'm joined by the Alliance co-founders, Dale Allen of Dexterra Institute and Jim Larimore of RID Labs. Welcome, Dale and Jim. Dale, can you tell me, if you will, how the idea for the Alliance came to be?
I can, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. At Dexterra, we're a nonprofit membership organization that focuses on building open source technology solutions to remove the friction points in education delivery. One of our communities, we do everything through communities of practice. One of our communities was focused on how could we take large amounts of data and make it openly available to the marketplace, to product developers, to researchers in education, to then allow them to better train artificial intelligence tools of the future, the next generation solutions. And we've been doing this for a couple of years. And as we were working along that community, one of the questions that arose was, as we put infrastructure together to enable open and authentic data to be made available to train these tools, to what standard or benchmark or framework should these artificial intelligence tools be brought forward and developed into to ensure that they're safe, equitable, have efficacy, and can remove the biases in many algorithms, which is the need for the data. And we didn't find any of those. And in collaboration with one of our members, who was RID and RID Labs, and Jim Larimore, ended up being the co-founder of EdSafe with me. We joined together with them along the last couple of years to explore this open, authentic data and then training better AI tools and looking for frameworks. And maybe I'll shift to Jim to introduce himself and the why behind this.
Okay. Oh, sure. Well, thanks, Dale. And Eric, good morning. So for me, I think the main elements of this are that as we were looking at it from the RID Labs perspective, we're a brand new company entering into the U.S. educational market. We know that AI is something that is still a little bit novel, right? Companies are getting used to using it. Schools and education practitioners are getting accustomed to AI being built in to different tools. And there's still a fair amount of public misunderstanding or confusion about what AI is, what it can do, what the consequences might be of its use. And fortunately, RID Labs was founded by a very forward-looking innovator who understood that we were in a position where we had to create the field that we're operating in, or kind of build out an ecosystem within which the company could be effective and successful. He combined both a mission focus on equity, or using AI right from the very beginning as an equity tool to try and improve educational outcomes for students and improve the lives of teachers and other educators so that they would have more time to spend in direct contact with their students. And that led to some opportunities for collaboration with Dexterra. Dale and I have known each other for the better part of a decade. We have a kind of a high trust relationship with one another, and we started thinking about the broad ecosystem. What would it take, to end up in a position where students and their families can feel confident about the use of AI in education? What does that then mean for, or what implications does that have for education practitioners, for researchers, for policymakers, for innovators, and for the investors that are behind those innovators? And we thought, well, how do you build a common dialogue? How do you start to move people towards shared definitions and understandings? How do you have an honest, but potentially direct conversation between these different parties about things where they might have different interests and where those have to be mediated? And so we, I think both have experience. I'm a former post-secondary student affairs practitioner who went to work in the foundation sector. So we're both accustomed to bringing people to the table who don't normally find themselves sitting at the same table for these conversations that have to go through layer after layer after layer of conversation. And we felt that was a sound approach to take in creating the alliance. We reached out and validated that approach with a number of trusted friends and colleagues from across the industry in a variety of different educational environments. And here we are 1 year later.
Here we are 1 year later. Well, to that point, Jim, when I think about my prior days as a classroom teacher and administrator in a high school a few years back, I too noticed that there was a gap in the sort of spaces available for folks that were interested in the developments of education technology, in curriculum and instruction, and policy. Meaning, like, there was not very many people that were interested in how those three overlapped. And I know good and well that both of you have, especially in those early days last year, had conversations across different constituent groups like that. Did you firstly find that was a rare, like I did, a rare space to accomplish conversation where technology and best practice and policy were merging? And secondly, what were some of those early conversations like when you took this initial idea for an alliance out there to share with those different constituent groups?
Sure. Yeah. So, one wonderful question, Eric, and your background, I think, holds true today. What we found was a fair amount of interest, but fragmented conversations. So teachers were talking with teachers, researchers were talking with researchers, policy people were talking with policy people, innovators were talking with people within their own companies or within a small network. And there was really not a broad kind of interconnected, multidisciplinary approach underway. And I think Dale and I both felt that with something this important and this complicated, you really need to have a multidisciplinary conversation. And you need to then think, I think fortunately, timing is good. So the concept of inclusive design is gathering momentum. People are a little more familiar with that. They can see the benefits of it, but they do need someone or some set of people and organizations to play a catalytic role in bringing people together, which I think was the second point. Maybe I'll let Dale speak to this. We found that while there was a lot of interest and there were a fair number of discussions that were underway, they were mostly kind of volunteer led. And Dale, do you want to jump in from here?
Sure. We noticed immediately this gap in the marketplace where the discussions that were occurring were in the silo, right? That my segment of the ecosystem was having a conversation about what does AI mean to a teacher? What could AI be defined as to researchers? What are our needs from our interest group as a company, an investor, a policymaker, whatever it may be? But there was a huge market gap on both knowledge, understanding, and collective tissue to have that discussion. And so one of the things we made after doing this significant research and interaction around the world, again, because we're an international organization ourselves at Dexterra. Many of our collaborators and networks beyond us are international in nature. What we found was this was the same discussion occurring in the European Union, over in Asia, in Australia, down into Africa, is that people want and desire and see the impacts that education technology can play, like you in the classroom. You know it can do it, but you have no idea what it really is or how it's developed or whether it's safe or not. And so that was the gap that we stepped into. And we, as Jim always says this, and I love this language, we wanted to create a circle of trust where people across the ecosystem could come together with their different self-interests and put them out there plainly and talk about a future together that brings next generation artificial intelligence tools to the market, because we know those tools are going to be the ones that make the difference in all areas of the world. Not only the first world countries, but the third world countries that need equitable education technology delivery, and we need safe tools to do it. And so by collectively working together, opening the door with just a wide invitation that says, join in, contribute your time, energy, and limited resource, make this work for others so we can establish collective frameworks, benchmarks, and standards that these tools can be trusted in the marketplace, and we can evolve and really allow innovation to occur with safe policy and trusted delivery. And that was the gap we stepped into and opened the door, and I've seen some success.
Right.
That's great. When you noticed those patterns occurring internationally, that the conversation was taking place concurrently. I'm guessing that's what sort of laid the groundwork for needing something that was generous enough to encompass the variances around the world, as common AI technologies were being employed in particular solutions in classrooms and at the district level, even at agency or state levels where compliance issues are being addressed with emerging technologies. As those patterns of conversation started to coalesce, how did the idea come to be that a framework of benchmarks would be the right approach, and how did you arrive at the SAFE acronym? So I'm curious about that part of the story. From hey, there's a need here, to part of the solution is for us to have this common language that's not too constrictive, but that is generally comprehensive to all the ways that we envision that AI can be used to better the profession for learning outcomes that we're all invested in. How did we get there?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, Jim, and I'll pick up with the acronym, which then can lead to the development of the working groups and what has come from that to these benchmarks. So when we were forming this concept and discussing with partners and collaborators around the world about this gap in the marketplace and the need to form an alliance, again, this is the alliance really means to me the ability to come together as a collective group with your self-interest, make progress together, but still maintain your individual identity and actions, right? And so the acronym that we resonated around was what we were really interested was a safe marketplace, right? I, as a parent of students in a school, want to know that the tools and technology they're using are going to protect their privacy, are going to be designed to some standard of industry-wide recognized standard that removes, in this case, bias or efficacy, or creates efficacy in the development of that. And so the acronym came about from that, was that we want safety to build trust. And as we thought about the acronym, it was in education, we want AI tools that have that have the notion of safety of data privacy and protection and meeting. This gets back to your second comment to a degree, of regional policies and practices, because we don't have a worldwide policy about data privacy and protection. EU, the European Union, has a different policies related to privacy and protection of student data or learner data throughout their lifetime than the United States does, or Africa does, or South Africa does, as a specific example. So we wanted safety to be about data privacy and protection. We wanted accountability to be about, which is the letter A, to be about what are the policies that can provide the marketplace both trust and safety and regulations to protect the environment and the individuals who are using and consuming these products, but at the same time enable innovation in the marketplace to occur. So accountability deals with the policy and best practices and establishing those through collective action that can then be applied on a regional basis, either on a state level in the United States, a national level, a regional level, whatever it may be, or folks like the Broadband Commission and the Data for Learning Working Group, which is international, can adopt them and align them and share those outputs. Where we're also engaged. The F deals with the fairness, which is about how do we remove bias. Then the training of algorithms for the use in AI tools, they're based on the data sets, and the data that they're used to train against are really important to remove inherent biases that we as humans impose on them from the beginning, and then need to be ferreted out with the use of large data sets. So really trying to think about bias and understand that. And E is really about the efficacy. Are there industry-wide standards that both companies, researchers, data scientists want to uphold and do uphold that show that a product or a software tool has efficacy in the marketplace and that it is valid? And those collective activities were really important to form SAFE. And that SAFE can then allow trust in the marketplace. So in the end, to support that, and maybe I'll flip to Jim for this piece, as we established working groups with members and participants from around the world to think about those acronyms, one of the first things that emerged beyond a common glossary and understanding in language that we can use collectively was how do we then apply that in these acronym areas? And from there, Jim, you can pick up with how this notion of benchmarks emerged and frameworks.
Yeah, happy to. And I'll kind of add just one more tactical element of this, Eric, because it won't surprise you as an educator. We read everything that we could get our hands on from different organizations, different individuals, as they were talking about challenges in the adoption and kind of use of AI in education. And there were certain things that kept popping up. There were, questions of sometimes described as questions of ethics in the use of AI. There were lots of concerns about bias, as Dale has mentioned, and so on. And as we read, we started to compile information and then think about whether sometimes different words were being used for the same thing. And we started to create these kind of broader categories, which we then tested against the kind of initial group of members and other people that we had engaged in conversation. And the SAFE, kind of SAFE framework kind of emerged out of that process as we tried to think of a more simplified framework that we could attach that was still broad enough that it would as kind of service our work moving forward. As Dale mentioned, we went into it knowing that some of those categories were likely to lend themselves to creation of benchmarks or standards, definitions and standards more quickly. So the world of data security, discussions around privacy, those are more mature and have been going for a while. So there are now, at least in certain areas, some technical standards that might apply, and that we could lift up. Something like accountability, which I think is a close cousin to explainability in the way that we've approached it, also means getting very clear about who's responsible for what. What is a teacher responsible for? What is a school or district responsible for? What is the vendor responsible for? And then what are other entities responsible for as we preemptively try to address issues or things that could become issues, or as we resolve things that are going to pop up in real time that need attention and where we don't want to have a collective problem where because everybody is responsible, no one takes responsibility, right? So we wanted to push ahead to say, at the beginning, we need to start thinking these through so that we can be as proactive as we can be, but we also develop, as Dale mentioned, this circle of trust where we can say that is something that my company should take care of, right? Or we should do this, but we should do it with input from a broader range of parties, so that the approach that we take is understood and pressure tested and accepted as a valid response. So we really kind of worked in a way based on where the current conversations or discussions were, but then pushing ourselves to think further ahead in time whenever we could.
That's great, Jim. Oh, go ahead, Dale.
Eric, if I could add just specifically about the frameworks, this notion of a framework that could then be populated and circulated emerged from those working groups as we thought about, what's more mature in the marketplace, who's developed standards for data privacy, and what are those and how do they apply? What are the policies that are out there? The notion of best practices and how do I apply this? The tool became a framework where we can start to populate and organically develop through collective input with segment-specific expertise behind the scenes, providing that effort to move it forward, where you can actually start to examine and look at your segment, your world. What are the components I should be thinking of? What are those best practices? And that is the work the working groups are doing now. That activity is establishing the frameworks, working collectively, pressure testing, as Jim said, with outside parties who are engaged as networks of networks, and that we're all working collectively on it. So ultimately end up with a product that you can use and can be modified throughout the lifetime of the marketplace. Yeah.
And I would add too, for people who want to think about this at an even higher level, two principles I think were always in our minds. One is that self-regulation is generally better than having externally imposed regulation. So having organizations take responsibility for the space they're going to be working in, I think was an important thing. And we knew that would then factor into the working group discussions and how we manage or facilitate that process. And the other was, to go back to an earlier comment, an inclusive approach where it's not just the tech companies that are making decisions and then telling people what they're going to do, but those discussions are going to happen with educators and policymakers and researchers at the table, because we want to be able to move faster together. And we know that if we're able to do that, we'll actually get to more reasonable, supportable approaches, and things that then are more trusted and more easily adopted in the marketplace.